Sire Studios Digital Network. That's youtube.com/Secrets of the Sire, facebook.com/Secrets of the Sire, twitch.tv/Secrets of the Sire, secretsofthesire.com, and the all-new site, SireDigital.com. SireDigital.com will actually house all of the digital means of streaming our awesome show. Tonight, Avengers Endgame predictions sure to go wrong. Game of Thrones recap, and Newsarama's Chris Arrant joins us to spin the racks. As always, I'm your host, Michael Dolce, and I am joined by the Lord of the live stream. That's right, you've been officially knighted. Something different. See how I tied that in to the Game of Thrones recap?
I see that, but I like Lord of the Radio. But okay, fair enough.
You're the Lord of the live. You're the Lord of the live stream.
I had the same anagram as Lord of the Rings, so it kind of worked for me.
Lord of the. Oh, I see. We're gonna have to come up with something new for you then to keep that anagram so that it's.
You said it was fine. You said we were on the radio.
Well, we were. And now we're live streaming because we're in the 21st century. How you doing, Hassan? How's everything going?
It's going great.
That's what I like to hear. You look the same. I didn't say you were good or bad. I just said
good to know that my physical appearance doesn't change no matter what's going on.
At least not on the show. So
yeah.
We don't know. You might not be wearing any pants. For all we know.
As a matter of fact,
you might be wearing a crop top for all we know.
No.
So let me get something off my chest right off the bat.
Oh boy.
What is up with all these people seeing Avengers Endgame already? I'm looking through my social feed. I'm looking through my Twitter feed. I'm like, hey, y'all, when are you going to go see it? Expecting, Thursday opening night, Saturday night, Friday night. In my case, it'll be Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. next week. And what I'm getting back are, seen it. What? Victor Dandridge, friend of the show.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I've seen it. You should too. Now, mind you, no spoilers. That's great. Annie Banks, Danielle Solzman. Yeah, I got to see it yesterday.
Everyone went during the premiere. The premiere was yesterday or Monday, right? Monday night.
Yeah, okay, and I guess there's preview, special previews too. So as a middling podcast, we need to get access to these movies beforehand. I think that's.
Well, you're never going to be anything more than a middling podcast if you don't stop calling yourself a middling podcast.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You are projecting. We need to manifest, as our previous guest Amanda Rose said.
Think big and be big.
We are a top tier middling podcast, is what you're trying to say, and I hear you. I think
I don't have the energy for it.
I
do not have the energy for it.
All right, so Avengers Endgame is obviously the biggest deal that's out there right now. I know Game of Thrones is going, and we will talk about the first two episodes because it was a good little prelude to war, essentially, for anybody who. That's not really spoilerish at this point. Also, it's Wednesday. I don't understand how you are not immediately watching the first two episodes of the final episodes of Game of Thrones if you are a hardcore fan. So we'll get to Game of Thrones. But Avengers Endgame...
Always like the fan discrimination. There's always fan discrimination. Like, unless you're the hardcore fan. Are you a hardcore fan?
No, really. No. All right. I'm not even questioning hardcore fandom here. I agree with you. The formula for this is overreaction to somebody not doing something or doing something, and then overreacting to the overreaction.
Yeah,
and then eventually coming to like a consensus until like the argument gets brought up a year later, and then the cycle kind of repeats. I'm just talking about like if you have been watching this show and or reading the books and or both. How are you not like immediately like how? Hassan, tell me, how are you not like just instantly? Unless, of course,
there are some extenuating circumstances. I know a couple of people who like to watch Game of Thrones with certain people who are on vacation or who are away on business. Okay. So they have to skip until those people or their husbands or wives come home from business, and so they can't watch any of the shows.
Right, they realize that's on them at this point, though, right? Like they have to take the responsibility to not find spoilers, because the rest of the world, I mean, are like literally live streaming it together if they have.
If I wanted to look at entertainment as some kind of important, what would you call it, public service announcement that
Mm-hmm.
that you know, like the emergency broadcasting system. Like if you
Yeah.
don't listen to the emergency broadcast and you get caught in the flood, that's your fault.
Yes, I agree.
If I wanted to view entertainment like that, yeah, then absolutely I would blame them. But I don't.
So once again, I'm correct, is what you're saying. Okay, good.
Once again, you are correct in believing that your incorrectness is correct. Yes.
Okay, good. I like it. I like the circumvention. Let's go down the Avengers Endgame rabbit hole of predictions sure to go wrong, because that to me. So let's take a high level approach to Avengers Endgame for a second, right? There's a sadness that is kind of coupled with the joy of finally getting to know the conclusion to part one, which was Avengers Infinity War. There's an excitement for that. There's also a sadness, though, that goes along with it, in the sense that my cousin actually posted this on one of my posts on Facebook. And he said, I hope this is the end of this 10-year like dominance of just superheroes at the box office, that everything is superheroes and that we're finally moving on to something new. Is that I don't want to say valid, because everything is valid, even things that are blatantly wrong have validity in being expressed. Do you foresee this as being the kind of polar shift into something new? Into like the new territory for the box office? Is this or is this simply the closing of one door and the opening of another?
Everything is a polar shift into something new.
Mm-hmm.
This is the closing of one door and into another, but who knows if superheroes are or are not on the other side of that door.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea of knowing. We have no way of knowing. Right. I think if this movie came, I mean, this looks like it's going to be the biggest movie of human history, right? They're talking about like 100 million, 300 million, something like that the first weekend.
Yep.
So if it's a tonal shift, you'd think you would start seeing it by now.
Right.
You know? So even if this is the catalyst that starts to close the door on superheroes, it's still going to be another 2-3 years before we realize this was where it started.
Right.
You know? Towards phase, what are we in now? We're going into phase 4 now.
Yes, this is the closing of phase 3.
Okay, so we're going into phase 4, maybe
amazingly enough.
Maybe halfway through phase 4, we'll realize that the end of phase 3 was pretty much the end of the superhero era.
Mm-hmm.
But Hollywood doesn't really have anything to replace it with. Usually, you see the impending doom on the horizon. You know, you see some other movie like dominating. The only thing that's competitive with superheroes is Star Wars. And that's on its own shaky ground, even though I do believe it's going to have a return to form by the end of this year with the Rise of Skywalker.
Sure.
How is it that I don't even have the Star Wars, the name of the most recent Star Wars episode on standby in my brain? It's so strange.
There's fatigue to that, and Disney's decision to kind of take a break from Star Wars, I think, is the right one.
I don't know. I
a little bit.
I think they just need to do better stories.
They do, but they've also, you know, this was the first time when Disney kind of came out, and instead of a new movie every 3 years, you had a new movie every single year. And at that point, there is an oversaturation, because whether or not, and we kind of touched upon this when we talked about our Star Wars Celebration episode, which you can stream us on iTunes and download us on Google Play. You can also go to Android and you can download the Secrets of the Sire mobile app. iTunes is coming this week. We talked about, you know, the Clone Wars, and I actually kind of said, you know, even though Clone Wars is canon, it's TV, it's a different thing. Mandalorian is going to be TV. They're really dedicating a lot of attention to the TV landscape and the streaming landscape versus the movies. To me, the movies were the only things you had to see. You had to see the movies. If you didn't watch Clone Wars, it's okay. You might not get the full picture, but at least you have an idea of things that are going on. I mean, even the Darth Maul cameo at the end of Solo was kind of, you know, tied into what was the cartoon that they kind of talked.
Rebels.
Rebels, right. So I didn't need to see Rebels to know who Darth Maul was. And had I watched Rebels, it would have been an extra little flavor on it. But at the same time, It wasn't like I was missing out on it. The fact that there was a new movie every year, I think, oversaturated things. Marvel, meanwhile, you have 2 or 3 movies a year, and there never seemed to be a saturation point. It never seemed to reach because they were spaced out enough. There were different heroes. It was different, and Marvel wisely wasn't giving you the same superhero movie every single time. You had things like Doctor Strange, which was kind of a fantasy mysticism element to it. You had...
He only got one, though.
No, I know, but you got Ant-Man, which, for better or for worse, is a heist movie with a buddy comedy, kind of mixed in between. Then you had your straightforward, Spider-Man, but that's more of a teen, angsty superhero, which is what Spider-Man is. There's enough, Thor could satiate your fantasy elements and or your space hopping elements, buddy cop kind of stuff with Ragnarok. There was each movie, while part of a grander whole, was able to touch upon something different each time. So the fatigue factor isn't as great as maybe say Star Wars. But I'm glad you mentioned Star Wars, and I'm glad we mentioned Game of Thrones.
I don't necessarily think it's fatigue. I don't necessarily think that the destruction of or the fall of superhero movies, I think that is fatigue or some kind of burnout. I think what's on the horizon for these movies, if anything, I think the thing that's going to kind of push these movies aside for something new is ironically going to be something new, because even though we're getting, even with Marvel's formula, everything is a form of rehash.
Yeah.
Because, the Infinity War is a rehash of a comic book story that came out years ago. Every one of the Marvel stories is a rehash of some old comic book thread or comic book storyline. All the Star Wars movies have been a rehash of in some way, with the exception of The Last Jedi, ironically. But that was such a departure that it rubbed, perhaps a large percentage of the fandom the wrong way.
Sure.
Everything has been some kind of nostalgic familiarity that we've been going on. Nothing brand new has been coming our way. The MCU, you can absolutely say that the act of seeing them all in reality, in real life, in flesh and blood with all these actors and these, you can say that that's a form of newness, or that's some kind of brand new reality. But they're really old stories. I mean, to anyone who's been reading these, to most of the not most of it, because obviously the entire world is not a fan of Marvel comics.
Right.
The comic books would be doing a lot better. But these stories are out there. If you want to look it up, if you wanted to look up the Winter Soldier, when you found out that the name of the second Captain America movie was Winter Soldier, you could go to Wikipedia and get the entire story. Yeah. Right? Get all. So nothing. We're not getting anything new. We're just getting a new polish on old stories in every way. Even the new Star Wars stories are retreads of the Force Awakens was A New Hope.
Sure.
Rogue One was with a nostalgia hit, with a dopamine nostalgia hit on A New Hope. Another bounce on that. Solo was another nostalgia hit. So all these things are just, hey, remember this? Remember this? Remember this? Hey, this got a new coat of paint on it.
Yeah.
This got a new, we put a new door on this.
Right.
We put a new windshield on this one. We put a new tent on that. So if once we start getting original content again, that might wash away the dominance of all these other movies. But who knows when original content's going to be coming around?
Yeah.
Because everything, like all the streaming services are now, every streaming service has a superhero television series.
Right.
From Doom Patrol to The Boys to the Umbrella Academy. The Marvel had a whole slew of shows that got canceled.
Right.
They've been dominating television for so long. All their shows are canceled, and we're still going into another phase of television dominance of superhero stuff. So who's to say? I don't know.
Right. So it's funny, though, again, you mentioned Star Wars and we were talking about Game of Thrones. Is 2019 the year of the villain? We have Thanos, we have the Night King, and now we have potentially the Emperor to cap us all off. I mean, this could be, it's funny, and I like kind of going back full circle to my original question about the end of an era. Are we going to look back on this, 5-10 years from now and go, oh man, remember how great it was? And you remember how great all the villains were and the heroes and everything like that. I mean, are we going to look back and understand just how lucky we are right now in 2019 in terms of this media we consume?
No. Because we never do.
Well, we do. Oh, no, we always look back.
When's the last time? Well,
so I'm imploring everyone, please, right now. I'm staring right into.
I mean,
recognize how amazing this is.
We're never going to talk about how lucky we were. We're always going to talk about how everything sucks now.
Yeah.
And things were better then. But we're never how lucky were we is a form of personal appreciation, of reflective admiration, and we never have that. We never.
I know.
We never go through phases of, man, we should have appreciated that more when we had it.
How extremely lucky. I thought this before Game of Thrones. My wife was kind of saying like, oh my God, I'm having Ajit. I can't believe it's over, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how fortunate were we just to have a Game of Thrones to kind of relish in and soak up for 7+ years. And now 10+ years of Marvel films. 8. Well, this is season 8, but I'm saying
9 years.
9 years. Is this, no, but it's season 8 of Game of Thrones. Oh, but there was a gap in between, right? I was going by what the seasons were, but yeah, I mean, just having this and then having 10 years of Marvel films to build up to this moment, this build up. We're an instant gratification society, and for once we actually have this slow build up that everyone was kind of like on board and came on board. If you envision a train at this point, and even Star Wars to an extent, right? I mean.
I think the MCU owes a lot to Game of Thrones. I think
sure,
because I think the MCU started around the same time as Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what happened was 2009, 2002 to 2010, something like that. I think Game of Thrones started in 2010.
Yeah.
So what happened was at some point I believe Kevin Feige or somebody in his circle decide, we're going over the limitations of the cinematic format for telling superhero stories, so translating comic books into superhero stories. And I'm sure either he or someone else just said out loud, it's too bad that movies don't work like TV, like a television series,
right?
Where you could do episodes and then for X amount of years, and then bring it to a culmination by the end. And they decided to try this experiment. And it's an experiment that it's a formula only they seem to be able to figure out, because everybody has been trying to rip them off since then, including Star Wars, and it hasn't been working. The problem is, are we coming to the end of that? Because the two greatest examples of that are ending this year, this summer.
Right.
I mean, this is 2019 is a year of endings. It's a year everything ends. Everything's ending this year. Game of Thrones ending this year. The MCU,
the Skywalker saga
is ending this year. Skywalker saga. Deadwood. Everything is coming to an end this year.
I would not throw Deadwood into the same conversation as those three. I'm just saying. It was a very nice
Of course you wouldn't, because you're kind of an ignoramus, but Deadwood is coming to an end.
I'm just saying. You're like these massively popular and amazing stories and Deadwood. Just
you have a long history of missing the cultural relevance of things, so it's okay. But
I'm gonna look back 5 years from now and be like, damn, Deadwood was so good, man.
Maybe you won't, but that doesn't mean you aren't everyone, are you? You're not even half of everyone.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're not even a tenth of everyone. So stop it.
I am the host of a high-tier middling podcast, so I think that speaks for itself. Upper tier middling podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not. I don't have the energy for that.
Speaking,
I already fought that battle earlier today, and I'm not fighting it again.
Speaking of our high tier middling podcast, I went back and re-listened to our fantasy death draft that we did before Infinity War. First of all, I got to tell you,
wish you told me to do that. Like, I wish you said that we were going to do that so that I could have done that.
Hats off
that
to
would have
us.
been kind of cool.
Hats off to us. That was an amazing show. I want to thank our guest,
I guess,
Derek Becker from Comic Pros and Cons. I want to thank Bevan from the Adultish podcast and Adultish web series. I want to thank Casey from Bad Coyote Funky for coming on board. This was a year ago. Go look us up. Go to secretsofthesire.com. All our podcasts are up there. You can stream them right off the website. Or again, download us on anywhere podcasts are found, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play. We have our app. We have the app coming on the iTunes store pretty soon as well, too. You can just get us everywhere. We're out there. I thought, besides being in a fantastically engrossing episode, and I love tooting our horn, I'm wondering, talking about predictions for this movie, how much the second time around, you and I specifically, without going through every single pick that we went through, you and I picked Iron Man and Hulk, who obviously made it. Coulson made it too. That was one of your other picks. I had Captain America. I had Hawkeye. I had Ant-Man. I had folks who weren't even in the movie, apparently. But how was I supposed to know that? Because I don't get the preview. I don't get those free previews that some of our friends seem to get. We're going to work on that.
If you had gotten a preview, then the entire show would have been bogus. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, good point. But I still want the preview. I'm wondering, out of all the stuff that we picked, the main cast and characters, obviously people are coming back, but who's staying dead for good? Give me your predictions for Avengers Endgame staying dead for good.
Iron Man, Captain America.
Ooh, you're going with the 1-2 punch. I am only going to go with Captain America. I think Chris Evans has gone on record, and we talked about this in the fantasy death draft too, is the fact that, his contracts are up. He's hanging up the shield for the most part, and someone else will probably take the mantle. I don't think they're going to recast Steve Rogers for the next phase. He'll go through his artsy-fartsy phase for about 10 years too, and then he'll eventually be like, oh yeah, I'm going to come back to Captain America because it was awesome, A, and B, I need to pay that mortgage on that second house, and C, it's just fun. I mean, it's just fun to have them return, and from a story point of view, at that point, it will make for a grand re-entrance for the character. But I think he's staying dead. I don't think Iron Man's staying dead in this one, though. I really don't. I think Downey Jr. is going to be back again because there might not be any more Iron Man movies, but I don't think the character is going away anytime soon just yet. I really don't. You also picked Hulk. What do you think? Are they ever going to get a Hulk movie right? Like an individual solo Hulk movie? I wonder if they're ever even going to try with Mark Ruffalo.
I don't think so. I thought there was some kind of issue with doing a Hulk movie, but I don't have it on hand. I don't, my recall is atrocious. Well, there's some kind of issue why there hasn't been a Hulk movie since 2008 or something like that. So,
yeah, I'm not sure. We'd have to go. We should reach out to our frequent collaborator, Mr. Jeff Gomez. He'll give us the skinny on that. So, Jeff, as you're listening to this, because he's a big fan of the show and he listens, DM us. Let us know, and we'll bring that up.
Does Jeff have the time for a middling podcast?
He always does. No, this is an upper tier. This is an upper tier middling podcast. You don't denigrate us. We literally graduated.
It's me
today.
Doing it now. I see. I get it. I know.
We graduated today. Today was our graduation. We're an upper tier middling podcast.
You know why we graduated?
Why?
Because I said we should graduate.
Hey. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how it does. It just matters that it does. That's all that matters.
I am the kingmaker. I have made us kings. Good. I'm going to do that in a couple of other situations.
I'm going to go on a limb here, actually. I'm looking at my 5 picks that I picked. I had Captain America, Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, Pepper Potts, and Ant-Man. 2 of the 5, not even in Infinity War, so I was negated there. Scarlet Witch, I at least got 1 right. I'm looking at Pepper Potts, I'm looking at Ant-Man, I'm looking at Hawkeye, and I'm looking at Captain America thinking, I think 2 out of those 4 don't make it out of this movie. I think Hawkeye. I think this is the end for Hawkeye too. Except I just thought about that, and there's a Disney Plus show coming out with Hawkeye, isn't there? Jeremy Renner.
Yep.
Look,
you know what? It's going to be the same as Game of Thrones. Either most of your favorites are going to die, or none.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those, or it's going to be in a way that you didn't even see coming. Because I mean, the internet is alive with predictions of who's going to die on Sunday on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I know.
Whereas I see the value in doing it. I think it's also obnoxious. I do find it obnoxious.
Well, everything that's done on the internet is obnoxious, isn't it? I mean, after a point.
Yeah, but we don't have to celebrate it like we have no choice. We got no choice. It's the internet. We have to go with it. It's obnoxious.
We are slaves to its artificial intelligent whims.
Fair enough.
I actually think there's just like literally a hamster running in a wheel in a sub-basement somewhere, and that's charging up the internet, and that's giving the internet its entire life. So we are actually the slaves to a giant hamster. All right.
Did you get your orders from the hamster this morning? Is that what happened?
Every morning.
The hamster called you?
Every morning.
Every morning is a hamster.
Every morning. All right. We want to know your thoughts. Chime in. We're on youtube.com/secrets of the sire. We're commenting there. Facebook.com/secrets of the sire. We're commenting there. Twitch.tv/secrets of the sire. I got that to work the last couple weeks. Woohoo, good for me. And again, you can actually pick and choose whatever, however you'd like to be watching us by going to siredigital.com or secretsofthesire.com. And it has all the options to see us live and to pick us up afterwards. And again, if you're listening to us, because this is a podcast, download us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play, anywhere, podcast.fm. There's like just a number of podcasting apps that you can get us. All right. When we come back, we're going to dip into Game of Thrones, dip our toes into the season of Game of Thrones. And then we're going to be welcoming Mr. Chris Arrant to give us more Avengers Endgame when we come back. Hi, everyone. This is Michael Dolce, host of the Secrets of the Sire radio show and podcast. And welcome to our Patreon launch event. To date, we've interviewed actor Kevin Bacon and rocker Chris Cornell. We spent a wacky week with a Real Housewife and played Love It or Shove It with a comic book icon. We've debated which TV shows everyone should be watching and channeled our inner force comparing Rogue One to The Force Awakens. And that's just the beginning. Become an executive producer and get an exclusive feed inside our studio before and while we air. Become a program director and receive our exclusive show outline with insider details on topics and guests hours before we go live. Or just be a fan, and for $0.25 a broadcast, we'll sing your praises on the interwebs every week. So if you like pop culture, movies, TV shows, and graphic novels, this is the Patreon page for you. Welcome back to Secrets of the Sire. We are a comic book movie podcast. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture. Yes. Everything in that sphere every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on the SireDigital.com network. Go check out SireDigital.com. You can stream us on YouTube, Facebook. You can stream us on Periscope. You can stream us on Twitch. There's lots of ways. And again, you can download us after the fact on SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeart, all the good stuff. Do us a favor and subscribe to our channels. However, whatever platform you enjoy the most, please subscribe or follow or like. It helps us continue doing what we do, whether or not you want us to keep doing it.
Helps us continue doing what we do when we do whatever it is we're doing.
Exactly. Whatever we do it best. We're also brought to you by our beloved patrons, Craig Caruso, Einar Peterson, Matt Beyer, Ashley Haikai, Omar Morales, our program director, Stephanie Dolce, and as always, our Uber fan, Christina Dolce, who will be on the show in a couple weeks to preview the end of Game of Thrones, which is a great segue into our next segment, which is the first 2 episodes of Game of Thrones is in the books. We've got 4 episodes to go, right? 6-episode season, I believe. Next week's episode is an hour and 24 minutes long, if I'm correct.
It's like a movie. It's a feature-length movie.
Because Barry, which, by the way, are you watching Barry at all? Or do you watch Barry on HBO?
No. Nope.
One of the greatest single seasons I've ever seen. Bill Hader is amazing. Henry Winkler is amazing. It's one of those shows where I'm sitting there going, don't think they should have came back for a second season, because now it was okay, and last episode, in episode 4, took a turn at the very end that I'm just sitting there kind of scratching my head.
Well, that's another internet bug, though, isn't it? Isn't it a terrible internet bug where like anything that's slightly less or reduced in quality from the last thing you saw was something that just shouldn't have happened? Instead of like the internet people don't take into account that there are ebbs and flows of these things.
Sure.
Sometimes, like the MCU wasn't on form for a full 10 years. Neither was Game of Thrones.
Right.
If you pay attention to anybody who talked about season 7. So if they stopped at season 7, and because everyone was like they ran out of novels, and therefore they've run out of form. They've run out of story. They're terrible now. If we had stopped there, we wouldn't be seeing. This
is a little different though, because Barry is a lot like.
I'm talking about the phenomenon of.
No, I get it.
It shouldn't have gone on. We shouldn't. It was perfect the way it was, and we should have left well enough.
There's some shows though, and I'm thinking to myself, Californication was one of them, where they didn't know if they were getting renewed, so they actually told a beginning, middle, and end, and it was perfect. And then, well, they got renewed, so then all of a sudden you're kind of like scraping the dust off. Veronica Mars, season 1, and Pat Shen can fight me on this as well too, because I thought season 2 was difficult. Season 1 was another one where it's like, wow, they really it's like the band, before they make it, they put all their energy and effort into the great album. They come out with the great album, they become this huge hit, and then they have to kind of replicate the same output, and it's impossible at that point. Barry, the first season of Barry, unfreaking believable. I mean, I'm telling you right now, it was the best show last year that I watched on TV, and the Emmys kind of backed me up on that.
You never talked about it. That's odd.
Well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily always fit.
It was so unbelievable that you didn't mention. We've talked off the air.
This is true, actually.
It's just.
I'm telling you and our general audience, go watch season 1, season 2. It's going to take a lot to bring this one back out there, and it is one of those things where I sit.
What if season 2 ends in this most phenomenal way, and it leads into season 3, which breaks the mold and is so much better than season 1, but you're on record saying it shouldn't even have gotten to season 2.
I'm almost saying it was so perfect. Season 1 was so perfect, I almost wish they hadn't sullied it with a season 2 that is kind of going off the rails. Now, you could be right. They have 6 more episodes. They could turn the ship around.
Perfect. Like I never understand these. Like I don't understand today. I don't understand our modern age of perfection. Like it's not a journey anymore.
It is. Like, that is exactly it.
I would say that no, it's not. Obviously, it's not. I would say that the entire series of Game of Thrones is a road towards perfection.
Yes.
It won't be perfect.
I agree.
Nothing is perfect.
I agree.
But it was the entire experience that brought us to here.
Yes.
That makes all this anticipation so palpable.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. If you keep concentrating on the individual achievements of the journey and don't concentrate on the journey in and of itself, you don't get the payoff at the end.
I think, though, you can separate the feeling you get as you're going on the individual journey. Look, not every Game of Thrones episode is the greatest Game of Thrones episode around. There's definitely filler.
What I said.
But you sit there and you go, well, it's not selling the experience because it's heading somewhere. It is actually a journey. In the case of something like Barry, the reason I bring it up, though, is you were on this journey and it reached its end at the end of season 1. It literally did.
It only reached the end of season 1, though.
It did.
You don't know.
There's a different sense, though, to it. Like, if you watch the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones, and then they said, we're not bringing Game of Thrones back, you'd sit there and go, oh, that stinks, because I know there's so much more to come. If you watch the end of season 1 of Barry, you'd be like, wow, that was a beginning, middle, and end, and it brought me to such a satisfying conclusion that if they did not make us another episode of this show, it wouldn't matter because I got everything I need out of it, and it took me on this wild journey, and this took me on this wild ride. And this season is just been very uneven, and some characters are acting certain ways where you sit there and go, you cringe. Whereas in the first season, you never did that. All right, Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Game of Thrones.
Okay.
First two episodes. The funny part about the first two episodes, right? And anybody who hasn't seen it yet, check out our first segment where I lash out at you. You basically have a system here. You have a scenario here where those first two episodes, because not a lot actually happens, if you think about it in terms of we know the war is coming. Buffy was a show that was a lot like this. You knew you were waiting for the inevitable showdown. Like, we're all waiting for this inevitable showdown between both the White Walkers and Cersei, right? There's a instance that happens a lot of times where these filler shows are just that. It's filler, right? Buffy did this at the tail end of season 5, where you could tell they were stalling, right? There's a difference between like we're going to the end and we're leading to the end to, well, we know the big showdown happens next episode, so we're kind of stalling a little bit, and we're trying to give you something of value. We're trying to write something that makes sense. We're trying to write something that entertains you. But all the good stuff is going to happen, in the season finale when the big battle happens. To me, that was actually not the case. I feel like this season, while not heavy, no deaths really, with the exception of that younger kid who we don't really know very well anyway, who got pinned up against the wall.
He was an Umber.
Right,
He was a young Umber.
Right, exactly.
They mentioned him at the beginning of the episode.
Right, he was red shirt. Is essentially what he was. He was
a number. The
yes.
numbers are very important to the
yes.
to the Game of Thrones story.
No, they are, but I'm saying that the character himself is someone we just met at the beginning of that episode.
Someone we met at the end of season 7.
Okay.
At the
relatively new.
At the beginning of season 7.
Right.
In fact.
But not enough to sit there. It's not a Hodor death, or it's not, a red wedding kind of death. This was a cool death, but with the exception of that, no one really dies. In fact, all of this gives us some peaceful resolutions, and it gives us a lot of really cool things. I felt like none of this was filler. I felt like none of this was stole. I felt like everything about the first two episodes has just been on point to resolving some plot threads. What say you, Hassan?
I would agree. I agree with you. I think it's all a tremendous setup. I'm having trouble with the attempt to contextualize what I'm seeing, just because the ball hasn't really started rolling yet.
Right.
So I mean, look, the only impression I really have from episode 1 and 2 is that it will be interesting to see how they wrap up the Daenerys story.
Yeah.
Because the Jon Snow story is basically it's almost it's got
right.
It's got a lot of characteristics that are unique, but it's basically the monomyth in its own way.
Sure.
If the trick about Game of Thrones is it threw so many characters at you that until I would say 70% of them died, you didn't realize who you should have been focusing on the entire time, which is fantastic. It's a fantastic experience. The books are a better experience. The books are more even and do a better way of showing it, but the television show is a superior adaptation of those books. I will not denigrate the television show by any stretch of the imagination. The books are liberating. Oh boy, that's not a word. Books are liberated in a form that it doesn't have to contextualize social requirements. We've been following Daenerys for
Mm-hmm.
9 years trying to do this thing, and she's been a powerful component of the story,
Mm-hmm.
just as much as Jon Snow and just as much as Arya and Sansa and the rest of these characters.
Right.
So now that now that it's culminating and we're getting to the top of the pyramid, right, where all the stories are starting to converge into one point, which would be the series finale.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting to realize that there are flaws in the genetic makeup of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
But no flaw in any of these characters has been so blatant as Daenerys' flaw of being obsessed with the Iron Throne.
Yeah.
And that's a thread that they've started with season 7.
Right.
And then you can actually watch, if you watch season 7 again, you can see a lot of times Tyrion's wincing at her. Mm-hmm. Because she's coming in right, with her fangs out.
Does she have the
well, it's not even a temperament.
King's...
Yeah, I mean, not just that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's a concern, but she doesn't have. She's in a foreign land. She's never been to Westeros. She's not listening to her advisors about how to coax these people, how to coax followers out of these people, and she's basically iron fisting it through the entire, and there are a number of moments when her advisors are like, that's not, you could totally win this without this, this unnecessary bloodshed.
Yeah.
Which is, it's kind of proving itself out this season with Sam's father and brother and a number of other things. Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out what the angle is, because in a novel, Daenerys could be just another red herring, and you could get away with that. She's another character you follow that you think is going to make it, and then it turns out that she didn't have the goods to make it. But so much, and I don't want to even use this analogy, there's so much political weight on landing all of these thread points, like in ways, so that because Game of Thrones has such a vast fan base. It means so many things to so many people. Right. If you just turn around and say, "Oh, Daenerys is really kind of kooky and she doesn't have what it takes to after 9 years of following her, turns out she didn't have what it takes to land on the throne. Too bad, you backed the wrong horse." Kind of. It's perilous. It's a very perilous way to do it. So it will be interesting, because that's the only thread that they kind of, that's the only what would you call it? The only unraveling that they're starting to show you. Right. Because Jon Snow is Jon Snow. He's noble, all the way up to when he finds out he's the heir to the Iron Throne. He's not a bastard anymore. He's the Lord and Master of everything. Right. He's got the blood of two major houses. I like what
Daenerys says, though. I like what she's like. Oh, so your brother and your best friend tell you this, and
Yeah, I mean,
but she'll know.
But I mean, the flaw is that she's not even like, and a lot of people have said this. The flaw isn't even. Well, wait a minute. That means, because I mean, one of the biggest problems that Jon might have had about the whole thing, it doesn't even necessarily have to be that he's king. Right. It means he's been sleeping with his aunt. And he's not a Targaryen, so that's not what the Starks do, right? Like he's like, ew, like it's so.
I was wondering about that, because that's been talked about for a long time now too, and I'm not sure, because in this world it just seems like not.
No, the Starks don't do that. The North, people in the North don't do that. The Targaryens have been doing it for 300 years. Right. Not a big deal for a Targaryen. Right. He's half Targaryen. Right. He wasn't raised believing he was a Targaryen. Right. Also, it also shows that the Stark blood is stronger than Targaryen blood, which is another interesting thing. Because every Targaryen has silver hair.
Oh, right.
This is the first mixing. That's also one of the plot threads from the original from season 1, where he said that the line is strong. They were talking about the Baratheons. The Baratheons all had dark hair except for Joffrey. Right. That's how they figured out that Joffrey wasn't Robert Baratheon's son. So that's a big deal. I don't know if they're going to continue following it through with this show because it got so little time to get that done. But if Jon Snow doesn't have a hint of Targaryen in him, you know, that to the point where he looks like a Stark.
Right.
He doesn't look like a Targaryen.
No, he does not.
So that means the Stark blood is stronger, maybe a stronger magic than the Targaryen blood, which is supposed to be a magic blood.
Right.
So it'll be interesting if they, you know, to see if they follow through on that.
I'm going to sit there and say, so I am so anti-spoiler. I really am. Even though my opening comments might suggest otherwise. That I don't even like listening to
that you blame the victims.
That was I didn't blame the victims.
Yes, you did.
I lashed out at them. There's a huge difference. I was aggressively. I was aggressive toward them.
I see. You weren't blaming them. You were persecuting them.
Exactly. Like I took action. I'm an action guy. Okay. I like taking action.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
But I am so anti. Like for my own self, wanting to know, and I'll use Buffy again as the example. I remember when.
Please stop. Buffy is a bad example.
Oh, Buffy's a great example, though.
No,
I needed to know so badly what happened at the end of season 5 after Buffy was killed. At the conclusion of how they're going to bring her back.
You didn't realize they were just going to bring her back.
It wasn't that they were or weren't. It was how they were going to, and what was going to happen.
I would have agreed with you.
But this is back before
that's ironic.
Social media.
It's ironic that's your focal point because that is exactly where I got off the Buffy boat.
Okay.
That's exactly the episode where I was like, this show's crap, and I got off the train.
Yeah.
So it's ironic that's your linchpin.
Yeah. No, but I started
your point about anticipation.
Right. But hang on, I was going to compliment you. Don't cut me off. I was going to compliment you. What you just said about the hair is something I never would have thought about. And it's also something that is not going to, how do I put this, directly impact the outcome of the story. It's got a lot of subtext to it, and it's going to pepper however the outcome ends up being, but it's not going to directly impact it to the point where it's going to ruin, like, oh, well, that means this is going to happen. And if that happens, then this happens. So I love it.
That's the point. That's my whole point about Game of Thrones in general. It's like I like all these plot threads that tie together.
Yeah.
But all these you'll listen. First of all, through stories alone, right? Through being a writer. This is not something that everybody can experience, and it's not a badge of honor. I'm not celebrating being a writer, you know, as a superior being over anything else.
Right.
But there are certain things as a writer that there's a language you learn in writing.
Right.
That, you know, there's cause and effect. There's foreshadowing. There are a lot of these other things that, you know, sewn threads, tying up loose ends. You know, fulfillment. You have to. There are percentages that you have to adhere to.
Right.
In order to tell a satisfying story.
Right.
And so listening to half of these yahoos talk about, oh, this is Tyrion, this is Targaryen. There's nothing. Maybe they will do that. Maybe.
Right.
But there's nothing that leads to that other than these fabricated. Like it's what's that documentary for Stanley Kubrick, Room 237 or something like that. It's that all over again.
Okay.
You know, it's like it's all these. You know, oh, this definitely, because he had this coffee can in this shot, this obviously means that this is about the struggle of the Native Americans against the white man.
Right.
And you're like, what does that got to do with The Shining? And I mean, it's fascinating, but it's empty calories. It's not nourishing by any stretch of the imagination. So me personally, even though I like to talk about this stuff, and I love to talk shop, I love to talk about stuff like, you know, like whose genes are stronger.
Right.
Like the fact that Lyanna Stark, like Rhaegar, is the son, is the culmination of 300 years of Targaryen breeding.
Right.
And he sleeps with Lyanna Stark, and her blood outshines his, to the fact that this child doesn't even look like a Targaryen after 300 years of both inbreeding and alliance, you know, allegical marriages outside of the bloodline. I love talking about stuff like that. But this who's gonna, is Bran really the Night King? Are we gonna?
Yeah,
maybe. But
I know.
But where's that coming from? That's not talking about the show.
Right.
That's you trying to
project,
kind of show your That's you trying to show your own creative muscles in the midst of something that's happening. I always think it's just like the MCU, and I know that we do this.
I like that we tie it together, though. See, that's what a synergistic show we have.
It comes from the years.
Upper tier, baby. Upper tier.
Yeah. I appreciate that this is what we do, but there's a percentage of anti or it's something, it's, I guess, some word I want to pick. It's anti-joy.
Right.
It's kind of a letdown.
Yeah.
It's kind of sabotage.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't right. Sabotage is a great word because that's what I did with Buffy. I actually sabotaged season 6. Now, season 6 was not a great season for them.
Nope.
However,
starting with the season finale of season 5.
I love the season finale of season 5, but I knew,
of course you did,
like months in advance, that Willow was going to be the big bad. I knew months in advance of all these things, and I'm just like, boy, I look back and go, you know what? If I'd have just left it alone, I might have enjoyed it more. I remember rewatching season 6 years later going, it wasn't as bad as I remembered. Yeah. It actually wasn't. It really wasn't. Had I not known
but what's funny,
ahead,
what's funny about that is if it was done today,
they
would have killed Willow. And season 6 would have been one of the most amazing seasons of the show.
Sure.
But, it's kind of it's kind of this weird television trope that they had in the night, which made television kind of insufferable back then.
Sure.
Although if you did it right, there's a way you could do it right. You could do 90s television correctly. I could cite many shows that did it correctly, in my opinion.
Right.
Some shows that didn't. My issue with Buffy is that it had like this epicness.
Right.
It was always on the verge of epicness, and it always recoiled just before it got epic. And it, and people were always, it's the exact opposite of what we have today. People were always celebrating the epic adjacentness of it, like it's not epic, but it's so close. I mean, it's so.
I like
so
you
amazing.
Using a current pop culture phrase, adjacent.
Yes. Adjacent.
Look at you.
It's not. It's
adjace. It's just adjace. Everything is short.
I said adjacent. I'm
sorry. I know. You are clearly a false prophet of pop culture savvy.
I'm not destroying the English language for pop culture. It's not happening from me.
Let me ask you,
I do enough butchering of the English language just because I can't talk.
I butcher people's names all the time. Let me ask you a question, and this is the one thing I thought of the first 2 episodes of Game of Thrones.
All right.
Because there's no source material, because we don't know what George R.R. Martin is thinking, as much as I loved the scenes with Jaime knighting
Brienne
of Tar and Tormund applauding and all of them kind of getting together, it was very satisfying because it satisfied a lot of plots and it was a feel-good moment. But I had this like sneaky suspicion, and I guess we won't know until those books come out, which they never will. If the producers and the writers and the creators kind of threw that in there, I feel like there was a lot of love for the fans.
Yeah, there's a lot
in those first 2 episodes.
The last 2 seasons have been,
and last season too, and that's a bit of a divergence because that's the one thing that if you read all the interviews with George R.R. Martin, he's like, and Robb Stark was obviously going to be the one that everyone should be rooting for, so I had to kill him. and not only did he kill him, but he killed him.
See, that's the thing. He always planned to kill Robb Stark.
No, I know
because because he never got a point of view chapter.
Right.
Because the way the books are done is for the people for the uninitiated. The books are done by points of view for each character.
Okay.
So each chapter is named after a character. So the first chapter is the very first chapter of Game of Thrones is seen through Bran's eyes. Bran Stark.
Okay.
And so you think that he's going to be the young boy, following the tropes of fantasy.
Sure.
He's going to be the young boy who's going to grow up and, he's going to be the hero at the end of it. Then he gets pushed out a window. So, and then it's also Eddard Stark. It's the second one. So you figure, okay, we're going to follow Sean Bean through this terrible world of injustice and corrupt, No, he gets his head cut off.
Right.
So he kind of sends you signals about who is important and who you should be paying attention to and maybe who you shouldn't be paying attention to. And if you're not on it or you don't care, which is like kind of what I was, I'm like, I'm just in it for the ride. And all the tropes that he had set forward and all the stuff that he had done were astonishing to me, but I wasn't studying them. There are scholars of those books that can tell you. I mean, there's just so much layers in those books. They're amazing. But the fact that Robb Stark never had a point of view chapter, he's always seen in the entire story through someone else's eyes, mostly his mother's eyes. Mostly Catelyn Stark.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of proof right there that he's not going to be the one.
But he also said, though, too, not getting into that minute detail, that this was the obvious choice. And I remember even feeling that. I'm like, oh, yeah, Robb Stark's going to do this now, man. He's our man now. And no.
Yeah, that's the problem. The problem with Game of Thrones for me always is that I had read the books first. Mm-hmm. And reading the books is a visceral experience, but visualizing these things is even more visceral, right? Yeah. So up until season 6, I knew everything that was going to happen. I knew Oberyn was going to get frickin' murdered. And I'm like, oh man. And everybody, I can see online, everyone's like, oh, I'm loving Oberyn.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh,
but that's the thing. That's the thing. You hit the nail on the head. It's like all these things that we were loving, George R. R. Martin crushes with his fist in our faces, like it's like literally like right in front of us, like splat. And
that's one of the most amazing things, because you cannot write like that if you don't know how to write like that.
The last 2 seasons, especially, has been more of the fan candy kind of things,
because they don't have the books anymore. It doesn't have the unique signature of George, because it doesn't have cynical. It doesn't have the cynicism anymore. Yeah. Game of Thrones is very cynical.
Yeah.
It's a very cynical story about, look, your heroes, I'll give you heroes. You're going to have heroes. You're not going to know who your heroes are, because you never know who's going to rise out of the ranks and be a hero. And there's going to, you're going to see people who you're going to want to be your heroes. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to be up to the task. And that's what life is. That's the way life, that's life the way George Martin sees it. Right. So, I mean, you and I would try to write like that because that's a popular way, but we wouldn't be able to do it because that's not our worldview. We don't know how to. We wouldn't know how to convince people that the world that we're trying to show you is real. We would follow through, and we'd be killing characters off left and right, like The Walking Dead or some of these other shows do in an attempt to be like Game of Thrones, in an attempt to make you understand that nobody's safe. But then you could feel that it's a boardroom decision. Killing this character off is a boardroom decision. Killing Glenn off twice is a boardroom decision. So it's not the same. And so look, I still respect it, and I have a unique perspective on it. We ran out of books. I ran out of my premonitions, my precognitive understanding of where the story's gonna go. So from season 6 on, I've been like, I'm watching the show like a new fan for the first time since the show started. Right. Because I have no idea what's going to happen next. Yeah. And I don't want to know. That's what's crazy about the internet. Is everybody's like, oh, you got these predictions. Here are all these ideas. And I'm like, no. The biggest problem I've had with this entire show is I've known every terrible thing that was going to happen to every character since the beginning. Yeah. And now I don't know. I have no idea who's going to die Sunday. And I'm loving it. I have no idea how the show is going to end. Who's going to kill Cersei? Is Cersei going to die? What if they pull a mind job and Cersei wins?
I know. I actually thought the same thing. I know. That
would be amazing.
I know.
And they've also from 9 years of doing this, they've also proven that they're capable of anything. They're capable of pulling anything.
I wonder if it's going to be like
I
a
think
Watchmen.
we're ruining it for ourselves.
Yeah.
Constantly trying to
I won't
dredge
even.
it.
I'm
not
even,
you,
yeah,
not us. We're a middling podcast. We're exempt.
We're upper tier.
But, I mean,
upper tier.
Upper tier and middling
We're upper tier,
podcast.
middling.
We're exempt from that, though. But I mean, I just
we're
don't
at the
understand.
top of the middle.
You can't go anywhere on your Facebook feed without seeing some kind of prediction or some kind of outrage about like Arya, because Arya had sex for the first time.
It was great.
She's not supposed to have sex because you see the way the world is, though. That's the same with the Star Wars thing, right?
Right.
The Force Awakens is too much like Star Wars. It's too much like A New Hope.
Uh-huh.
The Last Jedi is too different. Damn you, you know? It's this thing. Arya has been growing up in front of us for 10 years.
Sure.
We still insist on seeing her as a child.
Right.
You know, it's like, well, and I'm sure it's a kind of it's kind of a residual of maybe having your own child, and when they grow up they come of age, and they get married or something, go out. You can't really fathom like, oh my God, my kid's out there doing adult things. But look, you've watched her grow up.
Right.
People are outraged that she had sex. They're not outraged that as a 10-year-old she stuck a sword through someone's neck.
Well, that's typical 10-year.
The world is a strange place. That's why listening to these people is a waste of time. It really is.
You didn't stab anybody when you were 10? You haven't lived. All right. Well,
listen, man. If I did, I wouldn't be dumb enough to say it on the air in our top tier middling podcast.
Let us know what you think. Comment, and we will reply back because we're very vigilant with that. When we come back, we're going back to Avengers Endgame. We're bringing Chris Arrant from Newsarama to tell you about the tie-in books you need to be reading, and he's going to give away the movie because he's already seen it when we come back. Welcome back to Secrets of the Sire. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Sire Digital channel. That's SireDigital.com. Or you can go individually, go to YouTube.com/Secrets of the Sire, Facebook.com/Secrets of the Sire, and Twitch.tv/Secrets of the Sire. We're on Periscope at Sire Studios as well. Before we get to our guest and final segment, which we got to merge the two together today, which was awesome. We announced last week we were doing a live show that is our Avengers Endgame review, followed by some trivia that we're going to probably just incorporate into the podcast as well, too. I haven't told anybody that. But it's a live extravaganza. It's at Funny Business in Nyack, New York. So if you are just north of New York City, if you're in the New York City area, take a train, take a bus. It's a short 30 to 45-minute trip up north. If you're in Jersey, we're like there. And you can come check us out. We're going to be live streaming right from there. We're going to be doing our podcast. We've got the ladies from Geek Vibes Nation coming as well. They were a previous guest. They're going to be there as well. We have a few surprises. You never know. We always have some folks come out of the woodworks for these live events. And we're going to be reviewing Avengers Endgame, so you better have seen it by then. And then we're going to follow it up with some Avengers Trivia Night. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a blast. I'll probably bring beer. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, we do this every week. This week we do it with Chris Arrant, but we go spinning the racks.
Spin the rack, spin that rack.
We are joined by Chris Arrant from Newsarama. Chris, the big thing we're talking about is obviously Avengers Endgame. You are the editor at Newsarama. That's it. That's your official position. You are the editor. Give us all the dirty spoilers for Avengers Endgame comics.
Dirty spoilers. I thought it was going to be a completely different segment.
Jump in. Go ahead.
There was a big press screening on Tuesday that a lot of press went to. I can't give out any spoilers to that. Like people that are listening to this have probably seen some on like Twitter and Facebook, Instagram. I'm gonna try to keep it spoiler free for everybody. I just want to encourage everybody who's interested to go out and see the movie on Thursday. And there's a lot of comics that are on the shelves now and that will be that can kind of tie into that experience. Like if you want to read more about the movie or you have friends that want to read more about the movie, there's some really good comics that you can buy as gifts or just to recommend for people that are psyched about Endgame and Thanos and all that.
Which are?
This week just came out Avengers 18. It's the current Jason Aaron storyline. It ties into War of the Realms, but it has some interesting Avengers bits where the team is pretty close to what it is in the movies, give or take. There's also some trades out. There's a new collection of the original Infinity Gauntlet, which does show the snap and also shows in comics what happens after the snap. I don't want to spoil it, but it is worth a look. There's also several sequels to that are out. Infinity War by Jim Starlin. Also Infinity Crusade by Jim Starlin. They're really worth picking up just to see how what's happening in the movies, how it played out in comics.
I remember Infinity War because I had gotten into comics around, I guess, 92 or 93, and Infinity Gauntlet was 91, if I'm not mistaken. And it was way too expensive for me to buy because it was like hugely popular at that point, and that's when the comics were actually worth something. So the prices jacked up, and I was 12 years old, and I couldn't really afford it. But then I was like, oh, Infinity War, I'll get into this. And I remember reading Infinity War being like, I have no idea what's going on in this. I got no idea. How do you
just wanted to tell that sad story.
Oh, that's basically that's the entire reason for this podcast is for me to tell my sad stories. But if you were reading Infinity War and Infinity Crusade and even the original Infinity Gauntlet, how do you rectify if you've only seen the movies? Is there enough, in your opinion, to for a novice, a comic novice, to follow along?
I think if you've just seen Infinity War, the movie, you could go get Infinity Gauntlet, the comic book, and start from there. It does have some characters that aren't in the movie. Like there's this little-known character named Wolverine that's in it.
Oh, yes.
This guy with knife hand. Like Adam Warlock's in it, and there's a different version of Nebula. But I think by and large, people can really pick up on it. The George Perez artwork at the beginning doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
That Wolverine guy is a ripoff of Edward Scissorhands. I read that in an article. I know all about that. The secret's out.
It's probably the best standalone tie-in. Like if you like the movie. Like that, and then if you enjoy Infinity Gauntlet, then you can go to the Infinity War comic book that is a direct sequel to that, and pretty much the continuity for that is pretty much insular, so it's only to Infinity Gauntlet and what happens after that, like besides some weird costumes of the 1990s, like people with mullets and things like that.
So, it's funny you mentioned War of the Realms. The Avengers operates, or Marvel operates, years ahead of the films. Obviously, the films, mine from the comics. What is War of the Realms? I know that's their big event this year, and it's just been released. And I keep seeing ads for it, and I want to know, what is it, and why is it the big event this year?
It is Jason Aaron's been telling the story in Thor for the past 6 years. Basically, there's 10 realms in Asgardian mythology. Asgard is one of them. Earth is one of them. Heaven is one of them, and there's like other realms. Okay? And there's been this villain named Malekith who has been slowly building forces and conquering each of the realms. And he saved Asgard and Earth for last, and he conquered Asgard. So now he has Malekith has basically the forces of the 9 realms coming after the 10th realm, which is Earth. So it's all these Asgardian forces besides Thor and Loki that made it out, basically. So the Earth's mightiest heroes are making their last stand against, basically, Asgard's mightiest heroes, Heaven's mightiest heroes, and all the other realms. So it's like interesting. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings meets Marvel. Like he has some really big, epic clashes, and one of the cool things for me is they've planned it in advance so well that it's the same writer, same artist, same colorist that are doing all the issues. There won't be villains. There won't be any late books.
Are we sure?
Yeah. Before the first issue came out, they'd already finished the first 6 issues. And so they have it pretty well planned out. And this is really big, cohesive. The art's amazing. And also, Jason Aaron's a big fan of Asgard going back. So he's bringing up these little things that I see now that I think are going to turn into big things. Like I don't know if people remember the Art Adams X-Men annuals from the 80s and 90s.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
There was one that was the Asgardian Wars. Okay?
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
that's my favorite.
Art Adams doing the covers for War of the Realms. And there's this week, there's a War of the Realms Uncanny X-Men tie-in that's bringing back Danny Moonstar and her Asgardian horse and kind of picking up the elements from that storyline, some that haven't been touched on in 30 years. They're basically bringing that back. Like Wolfsbane had a kid, like a child with an Asgardian man. Well, they're going to bring up that for the first time in 30 years and all this kind of deep continuity stuff for basically longtime Marvel fans.
That's really awesome. One thing I've also noticed too is the fact that the Marvel Universe is looking a lot more. Oh, Hassan brought props. He got props.
Yep.
I like his props.
This is the Asgardian Wars. This is the greatest comic that's ever been written.
Oh, look at us go!
And I got this when I interned at Marvel Comics. I got this as a gift.
This makes it look like we really put prep work into this particular spot, which we didn't. You just happened to be carrying that around wherever you go.
It's always sitting by my art table.
You've just been waiting for that opportunity.
I have.
Like,
I've been waiting for someone to say Asgardian Wars since we started doing this show.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris.
Chris, you're psychic. The thing I was saying is I'm noticing more and more now within the actual Marvel universe, it's starting to really mirror the cinematic universe in terms of the characters, the looks, who's in, who's out. Is that a trend that CB Cebulski is going to keep going with? That seems to be a big deal. And is that, I mean, are we basically kind of merging the two universes into one at this point?
Like I don't think it hurts to a certain degree. Like they can't just parrot. Basically, the comics shouldn't just parrot what the movies are doing. But I think there is some benefits out of taking what they feel is the best of the movies and basically trying to replicate that in comics. Mm-hmm. And even if they don't do it exactly, like they just announced the new Valkyrie book based on the popularity of Valkyrie from the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The same Valkyrie. Like, spoilers, but it's Jane Foster has become the next Valkyrie.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard that.
So they're kind of inspired by the movies, but they're not basically shoehorning basically everything that happens in the movie to happen in the book.
Which I always kind of found a little funny too, because I would pick up something that was non-Marvel related, or if I was really young, and I'd be like, "Oh, I saw this in the movies," and then I'd open it and be like, "Well, this is completely different." And it would actually kind of throw me off. So I don't know what the best strategy is. Thank God I don't have to make those decisions. We just have to. We just get up on our pulpit and yell at them for making them, which is kind of nice. But it's definitely that fine line you got to walk. You know, since the last time we've had you on, DC had a little tiny movie called Shazam that happened to be breaking. What, they break 100 million recently domestically, and actually they did that a while ago. I think it turned out to be a both a critical and a commercial hit for DC. What's DC doing to tie in with that film? Is there anything that they've done to really tie in with that film since we last spoke and since the movie has actually been a hit?
So far, it's made $321 million, which is pretty good considering the budget for the film was only, I believe, $85 million.
Mm-hmm.
The lowest budget for a DC movie since, I think, like Catwoman. Like, they really made this on a tight budget, and as far as like kind of see it reflected in the comics, unfortunately, DC really hasn't come to bear with that. They did have a Shazam ongoing series, but it's been delayed, so there wasn't a trade out of that yet. And Shazam hasn't really shown up in the other comic books. Like I really think after some of the disappointments they've had with Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad, they're kind of hesitant of going all in. But like you'll see that even with Aquaman.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying, how the movie version doesn't look like the comic version. Like still currently, like Aquaman's the biggest DC movie ever, but if you knew Aquaman for that and you went to buy a comic, it doesn't look like Jason Momoa at all. They're slowly segueing to that, but they still haven't fully done it. So if you want Jason Momoa with tattoos and everything, there's no comic with that out there yet. So I think with Shazam, they're just playing it. They're just playing it safe, but I do think you will see it be introduced into the comics slowly.
Which is a shame because Shazam is actually reaching out to younger people too, like a younger audience. Younger audiences are really enjoying it. The 9 to 14-year-old crowd. Exactly the type of age you might be when you, I don't know, start reading comics. It'd be really nice to be able to like walk into a comic book store off the high of seeing Shazam and see, I don't know, a comic tied into that.
Yeah, like when Shazam came out, we at Newsarama did a list of the top 10 like best comic books you should pick up based on that. And I have my favorite Shazam comics. I probably have 20 or 30 of those, but a lot of those are out of print. Like either it's due to the name being Captain Marvel, or some of the storytelling was done in the 40s, and it's pretty problematic to racists. But so they really don't have a lot of material where they can rely on. There's probably 6 or 7 Shazam books that you can buy today that would be good to pick up on, but there's really not a lot out there for people that really enjoy the movie.
Yeah, DC's history is just too vast. There's no way they're going to be able to go back and retcon some of these things for contemporary images. It's just, and then wouldn't there be a fan revolt if they started doing that?
They solicited reprinting the original stories and just have a message at the beginning saying that basically this doesn't reflect DC. And they got they canceled the book. They don't say why, but they advertised it and then they changed their mind. So
oh boy,
it's some pretty tough imagery. So I could understand their position. It's just like I wish they could make some new material that would make us forget about the older material. But Shazam's one of those characters that a lot of comic creators want to do. Like if DC called me up today and said, "Hey, do you want to? Who wants to do it?" Like I know Mark Waid has publicly said. Holy Hamner has publicly said he would. Joshua Middleton, who doesn't do interiors anymore, said that he would do more. Like he did a miniseries with Judd Winnick. Chris Samney said he would do more. Like Evan Shanner said that he would do more Shazam. Like I think there's people out there. It's just the people that make the decisions need to slowly be brought around to realize that it's a good thing financially.
It's an actual industry, and maybe you should market your industry.
It's kind of hard though. It's kind of hard when you're cutting your titles. You're cutting the number of publications to like add new ones, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like trying to have your cake and eat it too. Like you want to cut costs, and then you still want to capitalize on the things you're cutting.
Have your cake and eat it too.
Yes, or eat your cake and have it too.
Right.
I'm sure it's tough for them. They've probably been burned like countless times with stuff they thought would be hits that weren't. Like there's probably all sorts of like Halle Berry, Catwoman movie time still sitting on shelves.
Could you imagine the closet full of Halle Berry Catwoman merchandise that they just can't do anything with right now? Halle Berry doesn't want it.
My closet's full of that stuff right now. They asked me to hold it for them, and they never came back. So I think I got screwed.
Where's your prop? Hold your prop up.
No, I'm not going to run to get that. That'll embarrass me and everybody else and the show.
And Chris will never come back. Chris, there are some awesome non-movie related books coming out. What's on your pull list this week?
This week, the sequel to Dustin Nguyen and Jeff Lemire's Descender came out called Ascender. I'm really excited for that. There's also, for fans of Dick Tracy, Mike Oeming from Powers.
Yeah.
A Dick Tracy series with each issue set in a different time period from the 1940s. There's a modern day issue and there's one in the future. I'm really excited for that. There's also this, like we can't go without talking about this little DC book called Heroes for Crisis 8. That's 8 of 9. I read a copy of that one early. I really think it's going to be an issue that people are going to be talking about. there's some major things that happen. Some people will recoil in horror. Some people will be excited about it. But it's for what they do in this issue. Like I'm really anticipating and kind of scared of what's in the final issue.
How many crises can they do in DC? I mean, that seems to be their only schlock is crisis. Crisis on this, identity crisis, crisis and crisis, identity crisis, crisis.
It's crisis of having an identity in a crisis time.
Like the same thing with Marvel doing stuff with Infinity in the title. Like some of those just haven't been as big. Like I remember a joke in an Excalibur annual that they showed a house of DC that had all these rooms in it that were basically different, named after different DC events like Crisis, Invasion, Worlds Unleashed, and like all those other things.
At least Marvel has Secret too. See, they got two. They got Secret and Infinity. So the next year's book is going to be Secret Infinity.
Infinity.
Chris, it is always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for not spoiling Avengers Endgame. I'm going on a social media embargo, and then next week we're doing our super awesome spoiler-filled review live from Funny Business in Nyack, New York. So thank you again for coming on board, and we will catch you after someone snaps their fingers and we're all back again, or at least half of us are back again, potentially, hopefully.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Chris, where can they find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at chrisarrant.com, and I'm always writing at newsarama.com.
I want to thank our guest, Mr. Chris Arrant from Newsarama. Awesome
Thanks,
stuff,
Chris.
As always. I did not realize Hassan was going to bring props. He was. Mind you, he is going to yell at me for not preparing him to go listen to our own podcast or have any knowledge of our own podcast. Yet, at the same time, he brings props. That's awesome. All right, next week, Avengers Endgame. We are live, Funny Business, Nyack, New York. Go check us out on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Secrets of the Sire for all the event details. Again, if you're in the New York City area, come visit us. We love it. We want a live audience because we are going to be playing Avengers Endgame trivia after the fact as well, too.
Do it.
So I think that's going to be pretty exciting. If you can't, because you live outside the New York City area, we'll be live streaming the whole thing. We'll be on youtube.com/Secrets of the Sire, facebook.com/Secrets of the Sire, twitch.tv/Secrets of the Sire. Go to SireDigital.com, or go to secretsofthesire.com. We'll see you next week.